So as I was saying, I'm not sure where that got cut off, but I was painting in her house, and there wasn't anything. I wasn't doing anything or using anything that she wasn't aware I was using. And about that time, I never felt that I was being videotaped or that there was a hidden camera in her house while Alvaro was there. And there may have been, but I didn't have an intuitive feeling of it. As soon as he was gone, I had this intuitive feeling that while I was painting and doing my oil painting, I felt watched. And I more than once had the feeling that there was a hidden camera somewhere in the house and that I was being filmed and being watched. My activities were being monitored. I would have no idea where that camera would have been hidden, and I'm not sure who was watching. I don't know if they were watching live or if they were watching like footage that was sent to them. But I had a very distinct feeling about it. And usually on those sorts of things, I'm not wrong. I'm, we could say, 90% sure that she was videotaping me and that I was being observed. And as I say, at some point I got home from, I guess from work or whatever I was doing that night. It was very late. Or maybe it was just evening and she wasn't there, I'm not sure. Anyway, I got to the house. There had been no notice at all. Oh, and then the other thing, she said that she needed a rent payment, and Alvaro was paying the rent. And Alvaro didn't tell me that he was going to leave the entire state, and he never said that at any time. He didn't tell me he had done that. He was still the person who was in charge of paying the rent, and we had a rental contract. That rental contract was for rent all the way through a specific time period. It was not just month to month. And Alvaro was paying, but he was making some kind of arrangement with her about it. So then she started asking me, and I said, well, you have to ask Alvaro, because I told him to leave, but we were still together. We weren't totally broken up. And he was still calling me, and he didn't say that we were completely broken up. And what happened in the end is that basically she did an illegal lockout, and she locked me out of the house that I was living in and that I had a right to. And she also did she also stole my hope chest. And it was a cedar, as I say, the cedar hope chest. She said, if he can't, she said something about, we'll just keep it here, and talked about negotiating that for a payment, but I said no. I said he's going to be paying the rent. And at no time did I sign anything that would have given her the right to take my hope chest as a form of payment for something. And basically she stole it. And then she tried to tell a judge later, she tried to claim that various items were her belongings. And she tried to include my hope chest as the part of that. But she basically still has my hope chest to this day, and I haven't been able to contest it because I was being basically tortured by the United States government. I think it's really strange that she goes to the Methodist Church, because since Alvaro is connected to the U.S. Department of State, and so was Hillary Clinton, and she's running the U.S. Department of State and is Methodist, I think that that's a connection that cannot be completely ignored. Because Michael Holt was also doing international work for the U.S. Department of State, and she was going on medical excursions to other countries, namely Brazil. It was something that she did almost every year. And I believe that it was not a mistake that Alvaro wanted to choose her house. I think that they already knew each other somehow, and most likely it was through some kind of work or federal government connection. So I think this is where my feeling like Gidget is coming into play, is that I was the one who was out of the loop. Like, these people knew that they were working for the federal government, but they never bothered to tell me. I mean, he told me that he had worked for Colombia, or worked for the FBI when he was in Colombia, but nobody wanted to tell me what they were doing while they were here in the United States. And so she stole my hope chest. She still has it, and I actually still intend to get it back from her because it doesn't belong to her. And the person who was supposed to be paying the rent and who knew that he was paying the rent was Alvaro. And I would think that it's the least that they can do, since they humiliated me in Wenatchee and people knew about it. I think that probably that would be a nice way of saying, I'm sorry. Because I'm never going to say I'm sorry. But, you know, they're not going to steal. She's not going to have sex with him. And he's not going to ask for the key so that he can keep me from discovering he's having sex with her. And then steal my hope chest. That's, you know, unacceptable. And she used people she knew, including police officers in the area. She used a lot of authorities in the area that she had contacts with. Her brother had connections with the police because he ran that bar. And there are only a couple of bars in Wenatchee, and they constantly involve police officers. Wenatchee is an area where they have a fist fight every single time that the bars are open. Every Friday night, there's a brawl in the streets. It's sometimes like they just, if there's not a brawl, somebody starts something just so that there is a brawl. It's like a Wenatchee tradition. I'd never seen like an actual fist fight or a physical fight of any kind until I was in Wenatchee. I'd been to many clubs, but they're a little more like, you know, we go dancing, we dance the whole night, that type of a club. Here it's like drink your beer bars and people slinging it out like old westerns. Like they're in old westerns, you know. And so they had cage fights there. I mean, like their main showing, I went to their theater, like the Performing Arts Center, because I was looking at, I thought, well, what kinds of shows do they have? I used to have season tickets to plays and different things in Portland, Oregon. And I like music, I like theater, and I like different kinds of things. And so I was wondering what they had, and like their calendar was one thing, physical thing after the other. Karate championship, such and such a date. Artillery, something, such and such a date. Cage fighting. I had to actually ask somebody what cage fighting was, because almost the entire calendar was slotted for cage fights. And cage fighting, for those who don't know, is basically slinging it out like you're in an old western, but incorporating some martial arts and everything else, and there are no rules. So you don't have to have perfect technique, you don't have to have a black belt. All you have to do is be able to get the guy to the ground, or whatever the deal is. I mean, how do you even judge cage fighting? Like, the first person who is unconscious is... I am not totally sure if they have rules, like you have to use at least one martial arts move during the cage fight. You know, or if it's just, it doesn't matter how you do it, just beat the guy up. But basically it's like blood and guts and gore, and beating the person up. So that's kind of what it's like in Wenatchee. You've got your Hanford people and your research people and high intel, CIA, and military intel individuals there, young and old. And then you've got a lot of cage fighting stuff, which makes for a really weird combination. So her brother, since that is the kind of thing that typically police are constantly involved with, I mean, there was nothing to do in Wenatchee. Basically, like, police could go after people who are going 40 in a 35-mile zone. I mean, that's real exciting to a cop. No, the cops like the good stuff. They want to go in and split up the brawl that's happening outside of the bar on Friday night. And they know all the bar owners, and some of the cops double as guards and bouncers. And, you know, try to investigate other things probably. On Friday nights and other nights for the bars there. So there are like 2 main bars. I think there were 3 maybe but there were 2. It was like you were either at Min's, which is the one that Michael Holt's brother was a part owner in, or you were at Clearwater, one or the other, Clearwater or Min's. So she had all those cop connections through her brother and then through on her own. And she started using a lot of that against me. She started pulling her weight and using her political connections to smear me. And the first thing they did is after I told Alvaro, I'd like you to leave, she stole my hope chest from me. She did an illegal lockout. I got home one day, the windows were all locked, or the doors were all totally locked. She had not given me a notice or anything. I had to climb in through a window to get to my things. And then after that, I think I asked her the next day about what had happened, and she said, oh, I actually remember the next thing. After I was locked out, then the next time I was forced, I couldn't get into the place, and I was waiting for her to get home. And I was at a different bar that was down the road. It was called Sharks. And it was within walking distance. And I was at Sharks because I couldn't get over to the other place without a car. And I didn't have a car. Alvaro had the car. And I walked over to Sharks, which was kind of close, and it was the only thing that was open that late at night while I was trying to get my things. And this guy wearing all red tells me that he wants to go out, and do I want to go out for a drink? And he's this like tall, dark-haired, kind of brawny person. And then we get into his truck or SUV or whatever it was, because it was a big Jeep. And he had to blow into a breathalyzer. I'd never seen anybody having to blow into a breathalyzer before, but it was almost like I was being made fun of. And then as we passed, while I was in this truck with him and he blew into his breathalyzer, he claimed it was because he got a DUI, but most likely he was another federal employee because he was just using this breathalyzer as an excuse for making himself look like he wasn't another federal employee. And all of the cops in town came out. It was really weird. And actually, I was kind of scared at that point because these cops came out of the woodwork and started laughing at me and were nodding at him. It was like a big joke. There were probably 4 different cop cars, 3 to 4 different cop cars with a bunch of different men and a couple women, and the same types of cops that were around when I was raped by the Italian American. And I went out dancing. So I did go dancing because I had nothing else to do. And I went dancing with him, but I didn't kiss him. I didn't want to do anything. And then he didn't like that, so then he took me back to my house. And actually, possibly that was when I found out I was locked out. It could have been at that point that I was locked out. Maybe like that time I really couldn't get into my house, or maybe that was the first time and I had to climb in the window, and then the next day I was gone. At any rate, she did this illegal lockout thing. I had to leave all my belongings because she did it like more than once, or said something to me, and I can't remember right off the top of my head now. But then I found out, later she had the police going through all my belongings, and the neighbor told me that. Actually, I think it was before I left again. No, it was after the lockout because I went over to the neighbor's house. And I asked the neighbor about her. And the neighbor said, "You're not the first person." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, she locked out a different housemate. And no notice or anything. They said it's illegal. And I said, "Well, I know it's illegal. They're supposed to give you a notice, but what do you mean?" They said, "She's done this to other people." And they said, "Yeah." They said that she did it to the woman who was right before you.